Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Guys on White Movies. I am here to bring you the movies, here to bring you the guys. I'm Aaron Covington, and I am here with
Amon Doomer
and Bernard Harris.
Bernard Harris.
My bad.
And this week, as long as we got it out there, Bernard Harris holding it down. And this week we're keeping the Halloween theme going. Spooky season is here.
Mm-hmm.
We went straight to the top. Straight to the top. This is the pinnacle of like scary movies in film history. I think like it's up there. You got to mention it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. If we drop that music, dun 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 dun, that's you would know what it is, just from that bad reinterpretation.
Cut it off just in time before we had to pay that royalty.
This movie is The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
Just let it sit there for a bit.
Yeah, 1973's The Exorcist.
The Exorcist, the original, directed by the late William Friedkin.
Yeah, Friedkin.
Mm-hmm.
Truly a legendary director. Not really in the like first rung of conversation of great directors, but if you're a film lover, I know about film history, I think he's one to know about and then check out his catalog. We were just talking about it before we started the pod, but besides The Exorcist,
yeah,
the scariest movie of all time, and we even get to like how it affected people when it came out.
Right.
There's also some great movies here on his IMDb, like 12 Angry Men, Rules of Engagement, Blue Chips for my basketball fans out there. French Connection, another truly classic, all-time great film.
He won an Oscar for that one. That was his first movie. French Connection.
What more can you say? So check out William Friedkin. Also, since he passed recently, there's a lot of new articles about him and new like stories. If you're on social media, you type in his name, search it, you'll see people relaying stories from his career, some really interesting stuff. He was a real passionate, fiery guy, had a lot of very strong opinions about things, so some good stories in there. R.I.P. to a legend.
R.I.P.
R.I.P.
But The Exorcist, our movie of the week. Let me read the log line and do the black movie. When a young girl is possessed by a mysterious entity, her mother seeks the help of two Catholic priests to save her. Pretty much.
Straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Black movie of the week. So I kind of went black adjacent. It's not really a black movie, but I thought this is kind of a natural sequel to The Exorcist, even though it was like 20 years later. And sometimes you just need one of the main people for it to be black enough. This is the movie Fallen, starring Denzel Washington.
Whoa, great choice.
Kind of, well, you know, when I was watching Exorcist, and as we'll talk about it, you know, the idea of being possessed is like, I read up on the sequels, and we'll get into some franchise talk also with this movie. But the sequels, from what I read, and then I looked up some clips and trailers, they just didn't land. And it's hard to land like this one. This one made like 10 times its budget or something crazy. But when I see Fallen, I'm like, this is probably what the sequel should have been like, you know, to keep it simpler. It's like they kind of tried to over-explain things or maybe get too complicated in the sequels from what I read and from what the box office said compared to the first one, you know. But it's hard to duplicate something like this, you know.
Yeah, totally.
It's funny because I was talking to my mother earlier, mentioned The Exorcist was the one we're going to be talking about, and she was telling me, you know, at the time where like people were having trouble sleeping, you know what I mean, that it was just like really freaky. And I think it's hilarious that not hilarious, but interesting that you chose Fallen, because I think that's one of the first movies that I can really recall where it just like, it was more than scary. It wormed its way into my brain in a way that just it stayed with me. So like for days afterwards, you know, the demon like moves by touch. I remember later, right after I finished watching it, one of my father's friends who I had not met at that time stopped over to the house and he stuck his hand out to shake my hand. And to this day, I know that man noticed that I waited just a little bit too long.
Like, bro, you gonna put the demon in me, man. I ain't trying to. I don't want those problems right now, man.
No more daps after that movie.
Yeah, it was that would freak me out for sure.
It definitely keeps that song "Time Is on My Side" in
Oh
my
yeah.
head sometimes, and then I see that like the character who was mainly possessed in the movie singing it. It's really creepy.
Also, Gandolfini in that, right?
Really?
One of the cops?
Yeah, he's like his partner or something, right?
Yeah,
Early Gandolfini, at least before Sopranos.
I think there's a couple other people in that movie.
Wow. I'm sold.
Goodman, right?
Who?
Is John Goodman in it? Or no?
Well, let's look it up.
Yeah, he is. Jonesy.
Donald Sutherland.
Oh yeah. Yeah, solid movie. I felt like it's one that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah, I've never heard of this movie. I'm sold. I got to check it out.
Oh, it's definitely like it's prime Denzel. I don't know
For sure.
exactly how
Spooky
old he
season.
was in '98, but it's like 35-year-old. It's like grown up Denzel. You know.
Yeah, sure.
Does he hit his catchphrase? Get your hand off me.
I don't think he says that. He definitely says "I guarantee" somewhere in that movie. Guarantee.
The perfect movie for him to say, "Get your hand off me," though. Let me tell you.
Ooh, dope.
So jumping into the Exorcist talk and the cultural part of it, yeah, this movie was a phenomenon. Reading through like the Wikipedia and a couple articles, it's like the studio knew that they liked them, like it was a good movie, but they didn't know how people would receive it. So there's actually a couple parts to like its whole release and impact. So first they released it on a limited release in like large cities, but the response was so overwhelming, they had to rush it out like a wide release.
Interesting.
This was like the first time a lot of people said they waited in line for a movie. This is 73.
Wow.
Let me see what else was like relevant here. It was just setting. It was in its first week. It set records for each theater it was booked in. Then they were like, "Oh, this is going to surpass." Once the huge crowd forced the studio to expand it to like 366 screens. They thought it would surpass My Fair Lady, which, if you're a film historian, if you like the history of film, that was big. And then it accounted for 15% of Warner's grosses in key markets. So it dominated when it came out. A funny side effect of it is they did not book it in Black neighborhoods. They didn't think that Black people would be interested in the film. But then Black people showed up to Westwood, which is like Westwood, Brentwood is like north of Beverly Hills, if you're not from LA, very white community, especially back then, by just near UCLA, affluent white community. Black people from like South Central LA were going to Westwood to see this movie.
Wow.
The studios were like, "Oh, Black people like it." Well, it deals with like the things that it deals with are so universal in terms of like, and we'll talk about this a lot, but anything supernatural or the possession or adjacent or gods and demons, like there is no sect of people on this planet that are immune to the pull of those kind of stories.
For sure.
Totally.
And so when that happened, studio support for Blaxploitation dwindled because they realized that Black audiences did not have any preference for them, that Black audiences would see anything.
Wow.
They stopped supporting Blaxploitation as much. And this, about the time Blaxploitation, I mean, I think it was still pretty big, but it started, after the 70s, there's very, very, very little.
Whoa.
Blaxploitation until like parody movies in the late 90s or the 2000s, you know.
Interesting. That's like a gift and a curse.
Like
That's
this
wild.
and a
Yeah.
curse, which
That's
is
incredible.
which is so crazy because you know, for us who were probably born in the 80s and people listening to this are probably born in the 80s, 90s, like you grew up having to watch so much white programming, you know, just searching
Mhm.
for like bits and pieces of, you know, Black or Mexican, Asian American, these kind of programmings. But it was something like this that played a role in white mainstream realizing that minorities would be able to watch and understand their movies. You know, they probably didn't think we could even understand
Yeah.
their movies.
Hmm.
But now, when it what also led to a situation where white people now can't relate to movies with minority leads.
Right, right. Where they've almost taken the wrong lesson. And I think it's a gift and a curse because it's a gift in that the people who are making these movies and distributing them are realizing, like you said, oh yeah, these are human experiences and all people can watch these kinds of movies and relate. But then it's a curse in that they're taking away from predominantly Black creators by not investing in Blaxploitation. And
Yeah.
it almost makes me wonder what that alternate timeline would be if they continued to think that.
Or just taking the Black, you know, audience for granted and saying, well, if you like white films, why should we make your film anymore? You know,
Right.
like we
Yeah,
already got you as an audience, we got your money, so we're gonna keep making, you know, this white led
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
it's for sure interesting. Like I definitely that was the same like thing I was thinking about of mine. Like it's kind of the wrong lesson that was taken, right? It's a data point. Data point is that human beings relate to human experiences. And I think you make a really important point, Aaron, about almost every culture on this planet. I can't think of one that doesn't have some sort of demon or evil entity sort of like piece of its mythology and its spiritual outlook on the world. But yeah, so like to find that this is a universal thing, and then for like, you know, honestly, this is a 50-year-old movie, right? 73. So for the racism, which was probably not even trying to be necessarily hit, to the lesson to be, you know, well, cool, then we don't have to do that thing anymore. We don't have to service that. And I think there's
Mhm.
you know, Aaron is very familiar. A thing that I rail on real a lot is like binary thinking, like A or B. And yeah, that alternate timeline where somebody looked and was like a yes and, you know, to take it
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know what I mean? It's just something a little bit more familiar, you know. If somebody said yes and we could still do both of these, I think that would have been, yeah, a better world that we would have grown up in seeing.
Yeah.
To this point, if you look at, I went to the Blaxploitation page on
Mhm.
Wikipedia, the number of Blaxploitation movies, it kind of starts in 68. 71 is like three, but from 72 to 75, there's like maybe a dozen a year. 76, there's like eight, four, one, two. By 79, it's two. And then after 79, it says post 1970s Blaxploitation. Just lists all of them until now, pretty much. And there's like as many in that, what's now a 40-year span, as there were in 75, which was like the peak.
Yeah.
So it
Wow.
definitely, you can see like whatever was in the pipeline by the time Exorcist came out still got made. And but then after, shortly after that, once that ran out, it was like slow, just or really a fast, painful death, you know, of the genre.
I
Wow.
think it like links up to that thing that we talked about before, the birth of the blockbuster in the Superman episode too, right?
100%.
You know, you often, Aaron, talk about this crossover era, the 2000s, right? It was really an era where there was a lot of integration, a lot of that 90s Black media, Hispanic media, whatever, a lot of that went away. and there's a bunch of reasons. 9/11 being a big one. Actually, it pulled a lot of the money out of the entertainment industry. But at the same time, you know, as you see movies become bigger and bigger business, is what you're describing. Like as these big movies, Jaws, and all these are coming out, all of a sudden there's no Blaxploitation anymore. There's no black films.
Yeah. That's
And just to end this part of it, oh no, go ahead, Amar.
Oh no, yeah, it's just reacting to that. It's like it's such a shame. And the it feels like we're trying to get back to it's strangely like the pendulum is going back to are there enough people of color as like creatives and directors? What about Korean like Korean American movies and then black movies and then this and that? It feels like they're trying to come back to course correcting and a lot of like exec talk, executives who greenlight things, they often use this term like, oh, it's a 4 quadrant
Yeah,
movie or show or piece of art, right? And the 4 quadrants don't include culture. It's just um, a human being. I'm trying to
just
get
an
as
age.
much money as possible.
Yeah, it's just an age distinction, not a
Yeah,
cultural distinction.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so they're just like kind of erase that idea with blockbusters where they're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Blacks like everybody's gonna come to this movie because it's starring Harrison Ford.
yeah. Like, well, yeah, and just kind of put a point on this. What Blaxploitation did, and what this era of movies, Exorcist to Star Wars and stuff, it made them say like, obviously they didn't stop making black content entirely, but because they now the studios picking and choosing what black stories they think are important to tell. So it really ushers in the era of the important black film. And a lot of comedies get made. Comedy is probably the one genre where blacks have good representation. So you can make a comedy and you can make an important film. And it really eliminated fictional, iconic characters from fictional black American iconic characters from like the storytelling lexicon in America.
Mm.
Like black iconic heroes are generally real people. A lot of, they'll tell a story about a real person. Athletes are celebrated, musicians, politicians, etc., etc. But, you know, after Shaft, there was no other. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
there are so few American black, like, iconic characters that exist, and even fewer that were created by American black artists.
Yeah,
Something I've
yeah,
been thinking about a lot. And when you look at it, it's like Blaxploitation was kind of a way to introduce a lot of these characters. Um, like I said, Shaft, but also, Dolomite and Black Belt Jones, Superfly,
mhm.
Coffee Brown. Like,
Black
these are all
Caesar.
fictional heroes that would have spawned other fictional heroes. And every culture has its fictional heroes. I mean, in America, we're overrun with white heroes, but we have so few American created, black created, fictional characters. And I think that's important for a culture to have. It's maybe a bigger topic for another time, but just to introduce it out there.
I think if I can say something real quick, that becomes really interesting because, right, what does become the iconic fictional black character of the 80s and going into the 90s? At that point, you're transferring over to music videos. It's the rapper, and more increasingly, it's the gangster rap fantasy, which, me, I love street rap, but like, it's the guns, it's the glitz, it's the girls, it's the cars. And that becomes like the fictional black hero to seek to attain because there is no film. It's just the music video.
Yeah. And that's not even fictional. These are real people
Right.
that are living out this life, But even going back, it's like, yeah, Michael Jackson created it in Thriller.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
in his songs where he's telling stories, and Prince created it using himself in Purple Rain. And, you know, but we don't have a Spider-Man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A Harry Potter, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A Dirty Harry, even, you know? That's
Hmm.
what the Shaft was. It was the Dirty Harry, but he wasn't allowed to become the mythic figure in the same way. So
That's true. Wesley aside, Wesley aside. Wesley has been holding it down forever. Snipes.
Wesley
Yeah.
Snipes, but what character? And then you're gonna say, well, Blade, but Blade in the comics is British, born and raised in London.
Wow.
Ooh,
Dropping knowledge.
damn.
Blade is
He's,
also not created by a black creator, you know.
yeah.
Wesley Snipes is our hero. Denzel is our hero, you know.
You tell me Blade is a top boy originally?
Yeah,
Uh,
mate.
yeah, mate.
Hey.
It's Tuesday, isn't it?
You know, so just so few. I mean, you know,
That's a
somebody
good
can
point.
be like, what about this character? What about this character? It's like, okay, maybe there's one or two. I'll name a couple white ones. You wouldn't stop. It'd be a year
No,
later,
I agree.
naming characters, you know.
Mhm.
We can't even get good, you know, leading cartoon characters in any kind of number, you know. You could go through Pixar's whole roster. Just about,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm. And then when you do get a character in recent events, it's because they go, oh, actually in universe 1748, this white original character is black. Oh, okay, okay. It's like it's not an original one.
Is that shots fired?
Shots
Is
fired.
that
Not at anybody
counter?
specifically,
No, no, just at the concept.
just a concept.
Um, all right, back to The Exorcist. It's complicated legacy of The Exorcist. What do you guys think of the movie? This is my first time seeing it. I don't know about you.
Oh wow. Yeah, this was similar to the last movie. I thought I had seen this movie just because it's so big culturally and in the zeitgeist and has been like remixed in so many ways. But this was my first time like front to back watching this movie. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, what about you?
seen it once before,
Right, right.
long time ago.
Yeah, it was fresh.
And what you
Mhm.
think? What are your thoughts?
Um, as far as that goes, I don't super enjoy the movie. But
It's weird. Like, is it meant to be enjoyed? I'm not
yeah.
Mhm.
sure.
I
Mhm.
don't, I'm not a huge like believer by any stretch, but you know, don't fuck with the devil. You know what I'm saying? Like Exorcist,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whole Exorcist genre is not really like my genre. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, well, I thought it was interesting. Like it is a 50-year-old movie, and to me, I was like thinking about that. That says something, right? Like,
Yeah.
and like I just happened to also see this magazine about the 20s and how it's been 100 years, and so just thinking about this as like a midway point, like it's a real interesting time capsule. I was using that about another William Friedkin movie before we started recording, but it is a really interesting time capsule because it's like they don't make movies like this anymore. But within this movie, you can see a lot of the shots and the scenes that will be replicated, not just in Exorcist genre, but in a lot of horror movies coming forward.
Yeah.
So like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it was very interesting and it's clearly a well-crafted film.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you 100%, Bernard. Like, I didn't. I told you guys that I had the option to watch this last night before bed,
Mhm.
and I went, no, can't do it. Just can't do it. It's not even like a that I think I would be particularly scared or anything, but you just, no matter your belief, just don't fuck with the devil. Don't ever fuck with. Don't do anything like to invite evil in. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this did play into kind of my Catholic upbringing and my mom. I just had her voice in my head the whole time, just going, "What is this? Turn it off. Go do something else." It was. I enjoy the. It's well crafted. I enjoy the history of the making of this movie and the impact it had on cinema and how people made movies from that point on.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not a movie I'm gonna ever turn on again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Had it
Yeah,
not been for this, I doubt that I would have ever watched it again. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Truly.
I mean, to that point, people were freaked out when it was released. Like people were vomiting in the in the theater and having
Yeah.
Yeah.
seizures and having all kind of like experiences. Like this movie did a number on people, and was very controversial. The Catholic Church had to like speak out about it. Crazy. I felt similar. Like I appreciated the way the movie was made. I really appreciated the ending where it was like, at one point when he left the older priest alone, and then he came back and the guy was dead. I was like, okay, we're gonna gear up for like a huge battle, final sequence, and that's not what happened. He just like attacked the thing, said possess me, it did, and he jumped out the window and died. And that was it. That was the end. I was like, I really appreciate it. And then he got his absolution when the priest came to him on the ground, like
Mhm.
anything you
Mhm.
want to confess, it was all about his faith and stuff and things. And I was like, that's a slick ending. That is a slick ending. I appreciate that instead of having to like gear up for another huge like fight sequence thing that we do in movies now.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So many movies now, they really end like 20 minutes before the big fight. Like that's the actual resolution. And then they're like, well, we got to have a big fight now. So
Mhm.
drum up a reason for them to meet in the middle of the city or in a warehouse somewhere.
Right.
But and I thought this movie very did a great job of building to it. I saw a tweet that was like, oh, and also great timing for us. There's a new Exorcist movie coming out. We didn't know that when we picked this,
Yeah.
but literally right after we picked this, when we started doing the more Halloween type movies, Interview with a Vampire 2 weeks ago, and we were like, oh, yeah, we should do The Exorcist. Didn't know that there was a new one coming out. So this is another instance. There's other times in this podcast where we've had just great timing.
Mhm.
Like we did the 8 Mile the week before that politician did the eight
Oh
mile
yeah.
Oh
the
yeah.
campaign trail. Like
No,
not
the
that
week after. We talked about it on the thing.
yeah, the week after. So not that
Mhm.
this is boosting us and we're getting thousands and thousands of views. I mean, we're still a humble mom and pop
Mhm.
shop,
But
just
we're
trying to.
influencing culture. We're influencing culture too, you know? We're talking about it and we're moving it in our little way.
In our little
Our
way. Oh my
tiny,
Mm.
God.
little
Mm.
minuscule way.
Big
Um,
tree, small seeds, you know what I mean?
Yes. Two small seeds. Exactly.
Even a small lighter can burn a bridge. Shout out Kendrick Lamar. But this movie did a great job of delaying what was coming. And
Mhm.
I think that really builds the tension. Like it starts in like with the Arabic call to prayer, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, there's like ancient curses in the ground, and they're finding these medallions. So it like, I mean, it's called The Exorcist. You know what you're gonna see. You've seen it. You know some heads are gonna be spinning. But it starts with like this reference to distant, distant past and curses long since forgotten. You know.
Mhm.
Then we come and we meet everybody in America in their normal state, and then things start to change. You know, the girl gets possessed,
Mhm.
and I also thought it was interesting that the guy we meet early, the old guy, old priest, we don't even see him again to the last half hour of the movie.
Mhm.
And the priest that we meet, the young priest, you know, he's not even dealing with any of this. He's dealing with his mom, who's old and sick, who doesn't want to listen and doesn't want to live in a better place or change anything about her life. And you know, she's, you know, just a stubborn parent, as parents are.
Mhm.
And you're just like, you know something bad's coming for her, and you're kind of scared. I was kind of like, is she gonna get possessed too? At some point? Like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Yeah.
But the movie's just building and putting all these pieces together. And then as a little girl gets possessed, it does the great thing of the disbelief. Nobody like knows what to do. Everybody thinks they have an answer. the
Mhm.
answers are correct, and as an audience, you're screaming, "It's a demon!"
Yeah.
Exercise, but they have to go through it in a realistic manner for the time. She has to go see doctors and do all these tests and stuff, and we're like, none of that is going to solve it. And we know as like
Mhm.
tortured and strapped down and stuck with needles and stuff, and
Yeah. It's more gruesome. The science and the medical version is more gruesome than what she needs, which is the exorcism, where they just have her strapped down. Like when they put the needle in her neck to give her some kind of a, I was like, oh, and the blood squirting out like that was normal for medicine back then. I was like, oh man, this is hard. They're bloodletting like this. They're not going to get rid of that demon that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It's really interesting. I know it's like based on like I think a pretty popular novel.
yeah,
Which makes a lot of sense because I feel like the movie's really novelistic in its form. Like I think these are some of the things that you're talking about, Aaron. Like the kind of quieter resolution, but also that really just kind of slow burn getting to know the characters. Like I felt like the movie's nearly halfway over before really even Reagan's mother, which I can't remember that character's name. But Ellen Burstyn, that's Ellen Burstyn, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
the actress. Mhm.
Yeah. The Ellen Burstyn character, by the time she meets the actual priest, Father Karras, the younger priest, I felt like that's nearly the midpoint of the movie. I wasn't really tracking it, but there's a lot of time just letting you live with these characters in their lives separately before you even get to that point.
Yeah.
And even when she meets him, she's like, there's a thing we could try. Like she can't say an exorcism. She's like, this, maybe if I heard that you knew something about a thing.
Right. Right.
Right.
And then he has to go through the BR. Oh, you're gonna get into it, like the process.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
But the idea that there's a bureaucracy and in order to even start the exorcism, he has to get all this proof, and he sat in that room freezing cold and heard her mumbling gibberish and then went back and went, we're gonna have to prove it. It's like
If he didn't believe it, he was like, no, I'm not gonna come. Then finally he goes and sees her.
Mhm.
She's like, and your dead mom. And he's like, hey, did your daughter know my mom died? She's like, no, man, how would she know that?
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
He's like, oh, okay. She's like, what is it? She's like, why do you ask? He's like, no reason. I just, it's not like she said something in a demonic voice to me about it or anything.
That's true. And a little fact about the author of the book and also the screenwriter, same guy, William Blatty, he started off as a comedy writer.
Well, that's actually something I was really thinking about, and especially with the sequels, right? Like the twists and turns in almost any movie are kind of comedic to me. It's just the tone that you put them in. I think I saw this when I took like a Scorsese class in film school, and it was like Mean Streets and like his movies. I'm like, this is all funny, just not packaged funny. And so in The Exorcist, it's like, these things aren't funny.
Yeah.
But like if you were doing improv of mine,
Yeah.
you did these turns in the scene, it would kill. Like
Yes.
the fact that when she's a demon, she's just cussing up a storm. It's just like saying the most raunchy stuff to people. That's hilarious. That's like hilarious. And when she's like stabbing herself and she's like
Yeah.
saying what she says there, it's like, man, that's horrifying, but it could be an episode of Family Guy too, just packaged a different way,
That's 100% right. It's the same little like tools of surprise and like heightening. Like, all right, well, she already cursed this time. What are we going to do next? Oh, let's take that crucifix and have her just stab herself. Okay, then what are we going to do next after that? It's just like
projectile vomits on people. Like, okay.
All right, put it in. Yeah.
I think even to your point, like it has been used in so many things comedically, like direct whether it's Scary Movie or a Family Guy or a Simpsons, so many things have like done those scenes, and they don't really change much. They
Yeah, you don't
do
even have to
just
change it.
package it as comedy.
Yeah. It's like the reaction makes it more funny now. These guys were all terrified.
Right.
But if somebody got projectile vomited and then looked at the camera like, another
Boo.
Saturday.
And which is why it's so easy to spoof it with the, the the Knighted Waynes dynasty, right?
Mhm.
They spoof all these scary movies, and it makes it easy. They just shift the reactions.
Exactly.
Yeah, I once was doing a writing class is more like prose writing, right? Novels and everything, but it was about horror, and somebody had said something to the point where like horror and comedy are basically the same thing, right? Like just they're both kind of the most extreme thing that can happen in the moment, but one, it's really just kind of how you're pitching it, how you're trying to get it received,
For sure.
Totally, totally. And I guess I'm just in the horror mode right now, but behind you, Bernard,
Yeah.
do you see it,
Oh
Aaron?
my God.
There's some creepy little, like where the plant is on the floor,
What?
the little, it's clearly knobs, but they look like eyes.
Oh, Brad, you is.
Can you see it?
That was,
I'm not crazy, right?
I mean, you should have led that a different way. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, bro.
There's someone in the
Don't.
I'm like, I see it everywhere. Yeah.
No, I see what you're saying, but the dawning look of horror on my eyes. What's behind me?
You didn't even turn around. You just kept looking at the screen.
Like what? Cool.
If you would have kept going, or if like your screen or mic would have cut off, I think Bernard just would have walked straight forward out of the apartment.
Yeah, man. I do not fuck with it. I'm out. Y'all can have a house. I'm good.
He just called us on his phone. It'd have been like walking, like, yeah, I'm sitting here. We talking the movie.
Right.
All right.
So about the movie.
You're panting. You're closely running. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that third act resolution.
Just looking behind. My bad. Didn't mean to freak you out.
For sure.
But-
For sure.
But I think to that point in the sequels of this movie, like, so on the franchise of Exorcist, this was real funny. I thought. Little fact: it said it made 661 million at the worldwide box office. The
Wow.
franchise, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now 6 movies. The first one made 441 million at the worldwide box office.
That's crazy.
So it was carrying.
It is carried a franchise. And like I said, when I read the other ones, I was like, I think one of the things that was missing was this humor.
Mhm.
And in this movie, there's very few explanations for things or wrapping up, or this demon just possessed this girl. It was not preordained, not fair,
Right.
random.
It really was. Yeah. I felt like a modern movie would have had some sort of like she's descended from something, right? There's such a like bent for the chosen one sort of storyline nowadays.
Yeah. And this was like an unremarkable girl. And it didn't, like, even though we started in a foreign land, as you would say, it didn't like really try to explain it. They just were there doing like a archaeological dig, more or less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But and another one is like this whole explanation, and James Earl Jones is like this chief or medicine man in some foreign country, and he controls locusts or something. It's like, what is happening? Like,
Yeah.
these demons need to be like random and unexplained. I think that's what's more terrifying.
Yeah. I agree. You don't really care about the lore. It just starts and goes right into it. Like,
Right.
you see potentially where the demon came from, but I didn't even really track the necklace, the pendant. I don't know how it got to the girl. I don't know how it was over there, but it's totally fine.
Yeah, it didn't matter. You know, if I was going to teach like a class, I want to teach a class on franchising. How to like
Mhm.
successfully do the franchise. Like, what is the audience really responding to here? You know, and I think there's like cues, like it being like a little funny that she's how she acts when she's possessed, which also is like, oh, a demon is like a prankster in a way. You know,
Right, right.
always trying to get you, gotcha,
Mm.
trick you.
Hmm.
Also, could really mess you up. You know.
Yeah.
I think that kind of thing, you know, ends up being missing. And I also think they try to make these horror movies like other horror movies, but the horror is in it being so demonic and unexplained, you know,
Hmm.
not in like the gross out humor or big set piece action set pieces that other horror movies have and maybe do real well. But this is
Yeah.
about the tension, the build up, and what being possessed by a demon
Yeah.
do to you or do to your family and your life, you know.
I was surprised how I can't even think of one jump scare.
Yeah.
Like in the traditional sense of music goes too loud, you see it.
Yeah.
Like there's just a lot of build up and then you see the image and it's just it lets the image do the horror, like do it by itself, which is impressive.
Yeah, I there's like that scene where she's in the attic, like looking around, and one of her like this is a rich family, right? They got servants, live-in servants,
Yeah.
and one of them, one of the servants is like up there. I can't remember. I watched this Friday night, so a couple days ago, but I don't remember even that having like that musical spike jump scare sort of moment. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
suddenly that guy's just there and the camera's on him, and you're like, what the you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a good point that she was rich. Like that's another thing the other ones kind of mess up on when I was reading. It's like they follow the priest maybe too much, or the family is like involved in this world in some way. But I do think that part of the terror was like, oh, this is like a well-off white lady with her
Hmm.
kid
Hmm.
whose life is changed. It almost like should have constantly been random white people, like a politician's and his kid, or dog even, you know, or
Hmm.
another author, or you know, people that aren't religious or scholars in this field or anything tied to it, just like random people with some money
Hmm.
that this happens to, you know, because when the daughter comes down and she's just having a party with all these, you know, industry people, presumably, you know, and the
Hmm.
daughter stands there and like pees on the floor, says what says something crazy, then pees on the floor. It's like, man, that is high key, like terrifying if you're a man,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, truly. And you reminded me of this movie made nowadays would have used all those little elements of the characters' personal dramas. Like the Ellen Burstyn's character was divorced, and
Hmm.
the
And that would have been a
dad,
much huger part of the story.
yeah, it would become part of the story. It'd become like they just kind of let it be there. And then it would be part of the reason of the Exorcist. Like the demon found this girl's body because there's no love, or the blah blah blah. And you're like, yeah, let's just go back to these 70s movies where it's like, oh no, it's just, this is here, but we're not going to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something that has been lost, and I don't know if it's because of like the superheroization or whatever of like modern movies or even franchise kind of storytelling, but there is like a desire for it all to make sense. I think even that Chosen One comment I made a little bit ago like keys into that, and I think in past movies they just had the understanding that bad things happen to regular people sometimes, and that it
Mhm.
doesn't have to, like it does, like, the villain doesn't need to have some deep personal backstory with you in order for a bad thing to happen and it be a really dramatic and traumatizing moment of your life that will make a captivating 2 hours of film. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wonder, like, do most horror movies start like the first Saw movie, for instance? That was like a random. I really haven't seen any other Saw movies because that first one kind of did me in. I was like, that's good, bro. I'm good on that.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
But I feel like a lot of horror movies start with like, oh, it's a random thing, and then later they all, fall into the modern movie making trap of trying to explain. And even like this Exorcist, after this one, they've done like two prequels. It's like I don't need a prequel, especially following these priests. The whole thing is that the priests haven't done this before. I don't want to go back. I want to
Right.
be in the
Mhm.
present, and these demons are like unleashed or something. Not don't explore. There's no reason to have a Exorcist prequel to me.
No, no, definitely not.
No, the prequel is set in the city of Hatra in the year 4000 BC. Like, it doesn't like
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, that
it's
city
so
that
ancient.
they're that city that they're like at in the beginning, which uh just to throw this out, that a lot of that city was destroyed by ISIS over the past like 10 years.
Mm.
So that like city that's in the beginning of the movie, that doesn't really exist at like that anymore. But yeah, like that's the prequel, going back to that, not necessarily what
Well,
Father
every
Jacob
prequel,
did.
every prequel nowadays, it's like it started in 1944, just
Mhm.
outside of Germany, or the Nazis, where it's always. I'm so sick
Yeah.
of hearing about World War II, bro. Don't even get me
For
started,
sure,
man.
bro.
I think the there's something to the demons' voices being all like white, stodgy people. Like the demon's
Yeah,
voice at one point was just a British guy,
yeah.
and then it was just like all sorts of things. Where I'm like, okay, this movie's not trying to make a point of this, but it's clearly avoided talking about. Well, it didn't avoid talking about race. You remember when that priest was playing the piano and he's talking about, man, my idea of heaven, it's all white and this and this and this. I made a quick note of that. The priest made that comment. I went, oh, interesting. This movie is about the curse of whiteness. All
Ooh.
the white man dug up this curse. He brought it back to his white people, and the white people are struggling,
Mm.
and they're the only ones affected. And the demon's white too.
That's pretty interesting, especially like I think the book is from the 50s, and like the Middle East was definitely like in revolt against the colonial powers for sure, heavy in like that time period, or had just a few years before. So that's
Right.
wild.
The book was inspired by a case from 49,
Okay.
4950 on Georgetown campus, but it came out in 71.
Oh, I thought it was earlier.
But I think the author experienced this case in the 50s,
Okay.
in the late 40s,
Mm.
in the 50s.
Man, that's a really quick turnaround back then too. Like the book was published in 71. They got the movie out by 73. Like, wow.
That's super fast.
Yeah, totally.
That's really interesting. This movie is about the white curse. Man, something in it made me think something similar. Nah, I don't think I wrote it down either, but
Yeah. Well, that's the
I
question that I
remember.
had that I was going to ask you guys was, what do you think the theme is? Because I didn't really come up to an answer. I think that's really interesting. I felt like I glimpsed some things about kind of like the passing of time, right? Like his mother's dying, like it's like the 70s and everything kind of changing guard, but I wasn't really
Mhm.
sure.
I think it was something about faith, but there was a couple things that did stand out to me about this movie culturally. So the idea of like in this movie, when you're dealing with scientists and doctors, they're like, it's just a temporal lobe. We have to electroshock treatment. We have to do that. I want to see a movie or a story told where people instantly believe something because people believe in supernatural stuff. Everybody's always
Yeah.
like looking in the sky. Is that an alien? These are aliens and conspiracy theories, and I know people believe they've seen ghosts, and their parents or grandparents have seen ghosts, or So they know somebody that's been possessed. All these things exist in mass, and people are willing, ready, want to believe, do 100% believe. So I do want to see a story where somebody's kid is acting like she comes down and pees, right? And people are like, oh, that's a demon. Yo, that's a demon. We going straight to the church. Yo, we're not even, yo, has your kid done that before? No. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, zest. Well, no, I just take it to a doctor. You're not taking it to no doctor. Taking it to the priest. We're taking it to the imam. We're taking it to the lady in the woods with the special elixirs. Because people do that stuff for like normal diseases now, like diseases that we kind of know how to treat or whatever. They'll be like, oh, you got arthritis. They'll be like, come on, we're going to put some holy water on that hand, and just think about, So I want to see that take on a story at some point.
That would have happened if she had more like black friends or ethnic friends. They would have been like, no, there's something up here. No, come on.
Yeah. And
You said they didn't find nothing?
I think this movie speaks to what's something that's happening so much now, which relates to what Amon said, is like kind of the white modern society being like kind of figuring out all these old things, timeless things work or should be a part of our lives, and kind of rejecting modern life in a lot of ways to get back to like earth and nature and communal living and things. And it's slowly making its way to the mainstream. And I think this movie does speak to that in a lot of ways. Especially when she's like, I just got to get a priest, and this is actually a demon thing. It's like, oh, you're accepting there's a order to things that bureaucracy and technology can't explain.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, Amon pointing this out as what I'm going to refer to as a colonial narrative now. And I do think that really tracks. And yeah, there is an overconfidence in the colonial systems, right? Whether that be Western medicine or Western science, everybody thinks they've got it figured out. But yeah, it really does take Ellen Burstyn's character is just absolute desperation to realize that, maybe there's things in this world that I don't understand.
And I wonder if as a society, we're not desperate now, and that's why it's happening. Also, a couple other things. I think there are some dangers from horror movies and science fiction on the human psyche. We were talking about this earlier this week, where like things happen in the movie and people are like, believe it's real, or believe it's real on a scale that's just not possible. Believing
right.
Also, even in this movie and in society, the reluctance to use the word impossible for something. So they'll be like, yeah, they put, I'll try to make something up. There's like indetectable particles in the air, smaller than an electron, that are being used for brain control, that kind of thing. And then you'd be like, no, that's not possible. And people are like, you can't say it's impossible. They're doing it. And it's like, you got that from like a movie or something,
Yeah.
And like the human imagination can take these things and manifest them to be like real fears,
Yeah.
And there's also something in this movie about the clandestine nature of organizations, governments, military, religions, and how all of that feeds into the hyperbole of superstition and exaggeration of beliefs and the supernatural, because everything that these organizations do is behind closed doors. So humans are left to come up with their own explanations for things. And it ends up as a conspiracy. It ends up as aliens did it. It ends up as vampires, etc., etc.,
Right.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I've just finished just a couple of days ago this book called Humankind. It's really fascinating. It takes the idea that human nature isn't necessarily all self-motivated and dog eat dog. Actually, we're motivated to communicate and to collaborate within community. It's really fascinating. Goes through a lot of different case studies and things like that. But he talks a lot about that, kind of like the sci-fi thinking. And one of the great I won't try to talk about the entire chapter, but one of the great chapters in it talks about Hurricane Katrina. And we all know all of the negative words and ideas and narratives that came out of Hurricane Katrina, specifically the racist ones about the Black community there. And then he just goes through the data piece by piece, from crime reports, police after action interviews, just all it, and almost everything that was said from looters to like, it's just not existent. It's sci-fi thinking.
Mm.
And all of that is that, and along with, like we were talking about earlier, the lack of fictional heroes, like in minority communities in America. These are all forms of a psychological control, and not in like a conspiracy theory way. Like, it's going to exist one way or another. It's just how is it used specifically, or what are the stories told in relation to these things, you know? People are always going to make up stories and have superstitions, you know, but what's allowed to live and what's not, you know, when do facts come in, and even facts of just being like, where was this said? A lot of times on social media, it's like, you'll see people responding to the response to a thing, but you can't find the response. You know what I mean? So people will be like, oh, everybody's saying like this athlete should apologize, but blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, can't find where anybody's saying that they should apologize. That's maybe not the best example, but just as an example, it'll be something like that. There's like a call to correct the response, but I don't actually see the incorrect response that people are correcting.
For sure.
They're like jumping step, you know?
Yeah, that's so real. I think I heard there's like a relationship therapist, and she was saying that we falsely think that we're rational creatures that have emotions sometimes get in the way. In reality, we're just emotionally rational creatures that every once in a while have logic and rational thinking. So it's easy, like we're saying, to see a bit of something and not have all of the context and information and just run with it. Like, oh, I've never met a Black person in my life, but the only way I've seen them is as bad guys on this news channel. That means I got to be cautious every time I see one. And I've got to run with that belief.
It's I'm just remembering from that book. It's called the nocebo effect. It's the opposite of the placebo effect. So like, if when somebody can give you a sugar pill, tell you it'll cure your cough, and your cough is cured. That's the placebo effect. Somebody can give you a sugar pill and tell you, oh, sorry, that was toxic, and you'll get sick, right? Because that's the nocebo effect. And human beings are really susceptible to the nocebo effect, even in horror stuff. One of the things I always think about is how many people who really love horror, and I'm not here to like, yuck anybody's yums or anything like that, you know what I mean? But how many people who really love horror, like, really place themselves in the shoes of like Freddy or Jason, like, that's me, I'm that. And it's kind of this nocebo effect, because it, more often than not, those people are also going through the world, kind of doing kind of antisocial actions. I say what I mean, blah, 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 just kind of with that, like, I don't give a fuck attitude. And it really is a nocebo effect. You saw that in the movie, and it affected the way that you brought that into your actual life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that can go for like paranoia between neighbors as well.
That's so real. And oh, go on, Aaron.
No, you go.
I was just about to say that's so real, and I think comedy falls into that trap as well, where when someone is, I've heard like Will Ferrell or Danny McBride, when they're talking about satirizing these characters, and then they talk about the people who come up to them and go like, "Hey, man, that character from Eastbound and Down, that's me, man." That's me. And they don't see the comedic take.
If that's you, you should be trying to better yourself.
100%. Right.
That's
Right.
the arc of the
That's
character.
the whole arc of the show. Is he's different at the end because he realized he was messing up his whole life. You get that, right?
Yeah, they're like, no, I don't watch the end. It makes me sad. I love everything before.
I also think that just blanket repetition plays into this also, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't think it's any coincidence that we get a new World War II. We kind of mentioned it earlier, like multiple projects every year.
Mhm.
And in society, we see people that sympathize and want to be or call themselves Nazis. It's like it's being repeatedly fed to us all the time. There's so much continual World War II propaganda. We don't hear people calling themselves any. There's not a neo anything else, but
Mhm.
there's neo these. I don't even like to say the word because it's repeated so much in society that I think just that repetition keeps it alive
Mhm.
and kind of is its own recruiting tool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
sure.
like, yeah, so people just then they start to be like, well, I'm like them. I'm not like what society wants me to be, and then they do bad things. We kind of self-fulfill our own prophecies just by blanket repetition. And no matter how much you say this is bad, this is evil, you're still saying this. And sometimes people only hear this,
Right.
and sometimes people want to be bad and evil, so they're looking for a model, and then you've given it to them.
Yeah. That's really
Yeah.
interesting and I guess difficult to be a creative and like just sit with that because there's obviously no like real way around
Well,
that.
human psychology is like it's not any one thing, it's a million things, a
Mhm.
billion,
7
7 billion,
billion.
things,
7 billion things for sure.
And if people getting to looking for like people, we're always looking for community,
Mhm.
Out of 7 billion, there's 100 that think this way. There's 10,000 that think this way. Those numbers,
Yeah, the numbers game is
minuscule
crazy.
percentages, but dangerous. One person can be dangerous, like we were saying earlier too. So 100,000 people can be real dangerous. 5,500 people can be real dangerous.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's so real. Mm. That's how we connect back to the Exorcist. It's like the repeated. I think we're wise enough viewers that we know, like, all right, these principles we're talking about. If I keep repeating this imagery and these like themes and thoughts, it's going to get to you. Which is why I feel like horror is not a genre I like to go to that much.
Yeah, but that's why none of us have really seen this movie, or we won't.
For sure.
Truly.
Not watching this again. It's like I don't need to. I don't want to
Yeah.
reinforce this too much in my brain.
I really
No.
don't love having this sort of stuff in my head, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's interesting, we talk about linking it back to The Exorcist. I do think that there's something akin to, of that sort of thinking, that sort of conspiratorial thinking, that sort of like repetitive, let me keep telling you this thing that I have the answers and I'm going to be the best leader, whatever it is, right? Political, wherever it's coming from, religious, however, there is something to it that is close to possession. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It possesses people and it slowly takes over their
Yeah.
thought and it slowly like becomes the focal point for everything that they engage with. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we all have family members or friends or someone from high school that we're like, how did this become who you are now? But it really does take over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so real.
Keep saying it. Humans were genetically predisposed to fanaticism. I've been saying this a lot lately, and something that exists and finds an audience. There's going to be that fanatic element to it. So
Yeah. To go back to your thing you just said, there's always going to be a percentage of that population who's going to lean that way.
yeah. Not to poo-poo on horror though. It's just
No,
For sure.
no.
it's really just the overall human condition of like buying into something so much, something that could be dangerous
Mm-hmm.
in its imagery or something. But most horror fans are not doing evil
No.
things. You know what I mean? Like Halloween Horror Night. Me and Amon, we live in LA, so there's a lot of like Halloween is huge in LA. It's bigger than
Hmm.
That
being from
makes
the
sense.
Midwest. I was surprised. I was like, yeah, it's all about Christmas in the Midwest. All about Halloween out here in LA.
Hmm.
That makes sense.
So we are really talking about the small percentage of people, or even people that the same thing with the World War II propaganda that really like, I mean, take it too far. What else can you think? Take it too
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. That's right.
Casting?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Let's jump into the casting.
So
Unless.
I didn't really, before I say anything, just want to shout out Max von Sydow for Sydow. I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Yeah.
Always a big favorite of mine. So great to see him as the old priest in this movie. But yeah, I had a hard time wrapping my head around casting. So maybe you guys go
Mhm.
out, maybe I'll try to wing it or see what I got. I got a couple in my head, but
Casting
Yeah.
is tough because one, this movie isn't really about any of the actors in a sense.
No.
And two, it's like, who do you even, I really have just the main two, the mom and the young priest.
okay.
And
Well,
I got
okay.
a Max, you know, older black actor. And
Okay.
other than that, it's like, I'm not going to cast kids really a lot. We've been through this before. It's just, I
Yeah.
don't know people under 18 that are acting. Like,
Right. Right.
that's a nationwide casting call every time.
Right.
Uh.
And maybe the director friend that dies, that's somebody that could be casted. But is it that important?
Oh
I don't.
yeah. 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 So being superstitious, I watched this movie. I cut this movie with another movie. So I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna watch a little bit of this movie, and then I'm gonna watch something else to kind of bring me back to humanity.
Okay.
Uh, and I'm sure you all will be able to guess what the other movie was based on my casting. I cast this movie as if I was going to shoot it in 1995.
Sweet.
Okay.
Okay, okay.
Love this.
Since we're kind of, should we just do like individual lists now? Since we're kind of,
Probably, yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'll go first. I'll go first. For the mom, Chris McNeil, I think her name was. I casted Sonja Son from The Wire,
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
who's also in The Shy. Yeah, she was
Sure.
black female cop in The Wire.
Yeah, she's great.
Awesome. Yep.
And for the priest, I went with Common, rapper Common. I don't think we've ever used Common.
Ooh.
Pretty
That's
big
great.
name. He also has this kind of preacher thing.
Mm-hmm.
Went with Common. For the old man, Max Van Sydow, Danny Glover. Shout out Danny Glover.
For sure.
All right. The legend.
Donald Glover's not father.
No relation. Uh, okay. I can go next. Let's see. So and this is still going to be a horror, but like we said, comedy horror, very similar. For the
The
mom,
disclaimer that this is still going to be horror is let's see where it takes us.
trust me, trust me. Give me the money. Trust me, it's going to be a horror. Uh, so the mom's character I cast 1995. I cast Nia Long. Give her the role. She can do it.
Yeah,
Innocent, like, oh,
she's
love her
definitely
daughter.
I like it. I like it. 1995. I like it.
And I did cast the daughter. And for the daughter's character,
When you go back in time, you can find who were the kid actors in a time. So
exactly, exactly. And which makes sense for the daughter to be Megan Good.
of course, always the 90s go-to child actor for sure.
For
Mm-hmm.
sure. For sure.
The innocence turned evil. That's going to work. And then for the priest, all right, come with me on this. We got to go
Oh
with
man, it was going
Chris Tucker. 95 Chris Tucker. We know Chris Tucker today to be able to hold it down.
what?
Young Chris
Do we
Tucker.
really know that?
Oh, come on. We know he can. Put him in one of those all those movies about what's that one guy's name? Three Kings? The
David
director.
Russell?
Yeah, put him in a David Russell movie. Chris Tucker holds it down. Chris Tucker only makes hits. Only.
Because he quit after Rush Hour movies, pretty much, more or less.
Right, but then he came back for that one David Russell movie.
I think Chris Tucker is actually really talented. I think he can do serious acting. I think what struck me is that like 95 Chris Tucker was like Friday Chris Tucker. He was like
Mm-hmm.
22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay,
you know,
you're right. You're right.
he,
We'll age him
he-
up a little bit.
but he did show like over his career that he has, that he's talented, that he could really do some things. So, and I see why you prefaced it as like this is still a horror movie, but Chris Tucker,
Still a horror movie for sure.
Chris Tucker is in it. No, I like that, and Nia Long, of course. Hard to have
Yes.
Chris Tucker and Nia Long and not have a little, you might have to have a little romance there. We want to see that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right.
You know,
But nah, he's a priest. He can't. He can't.
mm.
That'll be part of the conflict.
Which makes it even more chaste. I mean, we didn't talk about it a lot, but not unlike Twilight, this movie has a lot of sexual, allusions and references. And some of it's very overt. Some of it's, the religious view on sex and sexuality, and it being like inhabited by a demon, and then they'll be taking her with something in the hospital. It's very sexual imagery in this movie, but not like sensual or
Right.
romantic in the way Twilight was. Very like dangerous and violent.
Yeah. And to think for the 70s as well. Like I watch it now and we've been bombarded with movies and language that have just been inspired by this movie. So you watch it and go, all right, the language is bad, but it's not anything. But I'm sure you go back to the 70s and they hear that word, they're like, oh, a bad word?
Pearl clutching.
Yeah.
In the theaters.
On the big screen.
Oh,
Bro,
no.
when she's talking while she's stabbing herself with the crucifix, I just thought like 1973 people fucking lost it. Can you imagine?
Man. Yeah.
They was walking out of the theater.
Walking out of the theater, you know what I mean?
100%. There were some parents grabbing their kids being like, why'd you tell me to take you to this?
Right. When there were only 2 ratings, like G and R.
I go to The Exorcist? No. Don't even say that title in my house. Gotta sneak out.
Truly.
B, did you put a quick casting together?
Yeah, I put a quick casting together. So I guess I'll start with the priest. I'll just go in order. I kind of have 2 here. My first one is I've been watching Wheel of Time. I really enjoy it. There's a young actor in there, Marcus Rutherford. I really like him. So if you wanted to go younger, because he's got to be in his 20s. I remember seeing him as a younger actor, like in his teens, not that long ago. So if you wanted to go younger, I'd go Marcus Rutherford. But if I wanted to kind of keep it similar age group as the guy, I'm going to go Sterling Brown.
Yeah.
Mom, Kerry Washington.
Hmm.
Older priest, Delroy Lindo. And she's a little bit old for it now, but I still stick with it. For Reagan, for the girl, I went Marsai Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might have just put together the cast that will get this greenlit.
I'm gonna throw Coleman Domingo in there. Just we'll make up a roll.
Yeah,
Take a shot. Everybody.
No. Her friend Barney or whatever, the director dude, like he's got to be Coleman, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Or the other priest, the priest friend.
The other priest. Yes.
Yeah, that's Coleman Domingo for sure.
Yeah. So if you're playing the Black Guys and White Movies drinking game, take a shot.
Take a shot now.
Unorthodox choice by Amon. Take a shot. It's like a whole bingo.
Amon cast a rapper in a major dramatic role. Take a shot.
Oh yeah, we got to think of a rapper now. You got to throw a. All right, let's just throw in Lil Uzi Vert as the little baby girl that gets.
I'm gonna make the young girl Ice Spice is gonna be the rapper. She's gonna be the girl, the little girl.
Can you imagine Ice
She's
Spice?
gonna be like. Fuck.
Hilarious.
Just like you think that works, goofy. Like, oh, so much attitude. I love it.
So much attitude. Such a sassy devil.
She's like, your mom is dead. Like, so okay?
Like,
Right.
so
Like, you little brat. Also, last thing that just stuck out to me about the movie is like, and this is such a religious thing. They go, there's a demon. Say the Lord's Prayer. That'll get him. I just always find that funny. It's like, these are the words that will stop any demon. Besides the fact that the Lord's Prayer is translated now from multiple different languages, multiple
right.
different English translations. But if you sit down and go, Our Father, which art in heaven, any demon's gonna be like, no. And like anytime like magic or stuff is used in a movie or in a book or anything, it's always like they have to speak in some ancient dead language.
Always Latin. It's always Latin.
But no, unless it's the Lord's Prayer, you can just say in plain old English, whatever version you learned. And then the demon's like, oh, God, no. I'm glad it didn't really work in this movie. Like, you couldn't really tell what this demon was being affected by or not until he made it jump into him, the priest did, and then he killed himself. Because like the holy water, the first time he was like, that was just tap water. So, but then later we learned that the demon lies about everything and is super manipulative. So we were like, was the demon just messing with him then? Or does the holy water really work at all? And later they kind of make it seem like it does, but it's still like, that demon then killed the old man pretty easily when the guy left the room. So it's like, I don't know, none of that stuff was working, you know?
It's funny that you just mentioned that, you know, it's kind of interesting. And this might just be part of the time because it does a lot, right? It shows a lot. Somebody probably rated this X and they had to cut some things out or something like that. I could just imagine with that time period. But all of the kills are off screen. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right. No, you're not wrong.
You know what I mean? Like in almost every case, somebody was left alone in the room and you come back and they're dead.
Yeah.
Or they've been thrown out the window once or twice.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very mysterious circumstances each time.
Yeah.
And to the point where they have to like investigate using the real and science stuff, but there's always somebody like, oh, I think she's possessed, bro. That wasn't a normal death.
Yeah. He was thrown out with the force of 4 strong men. Like, and it was just her in the room? I don't know. The way his neck snapped.
Yeah. His neck was bent backward. Like,
yeah.
Could have happened from the fall, but I feel like it happened from the fall.
And lastly, I don't know, to be the young actress Linda Blair doing these things, that must have been a trip, man.
Yeah, I thought about that I didn't look up any interviews.
She's clearly young. Like she's like looks like she's 13 or something like that.
I don't really know how she felt about that, but she came back for some of the sequels too. Yeah. So it's interesting.
No, yeah, I don't want to get into all like the logic gaps and the holes and everything, but just a pure sign of privilege. There have been multiple murders that have happened at this home. This girl is not in jail. Like there's no like, no, it's okay. We're gonna solve this. I'm gonna get my own investigators to figure this out.
Yeah, the detective is still like, I'm this close to snapping the trap shot.
If it was a minority, they'd have been like, we don't care if she's mentally having an episode, mentally disabled. Like, she should be shot. So it is incredible privilege, which is why I think the other ones should have kept it with the rich family. Anyway,
agreed.
Franchising 101. My class is $2,000.
I'll take the class.
$2,000. Yeah.
It's important. It's important.
Oh, it's only for like execs and agents and stuff right now because they're the ones controlling the franchises. We're trying to fix franchising moving forward, you know.
Right. That's too real. I can't end the pod without saying when I told a friend that we were watching this movie for the podcast, she was like, oh yeah. She didn't understand the premise of the podcast, but she was like, oh yeah, that is a very white movie. She gets possessed, and throughout the movie, she becomes whiter and whiter.
Yes.
In her skin.
Yes.
And I went, all right, you know what? That's right. That's a good point. she becomes pale, 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 and even deeper white.
Possessed by the colonizer's mindset, my brother. No, I'm just
Speak on it. Speak on it.
That's
What
wild.
does
That's
she
wild. I love
think the
that.
premise is? Did
I
you
think
explain it to her, or like, did you ask her, like, what does she think? It's just
she,
the color white things
yeah,
becoming.
she just thought it was a movie where white people become more white, or the podcast was about white people that became more white. She was
In a
also white.
literal
Let me
sense,
just say.
though.
I
Not
think we
like
need to launch that podcast.
I want to know more
Mhm.
what this girl thinks this podcast
She ran with it.
should be about, like, is about in her in her mind. Like, I'm very curious to what white people think
Yeah.
movies are, because white people think it's like a small category, like, oh, white movies. So it's like, with the
Mhm.
people really white. I'm like, no, all these movies is white. They
Mhm.
all 90% of American movies is white movies. This is what we're trying to tell you. This is the issue that
No,
any
I think
if you ask any minority, they're like, oh, so like every movie? We're like, yeah, almost every movie.
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. You know what I mean? Just to bring up as like somebody who's, also had conversations with white friends and like mentioned the podcast, and it is always like just a little so what sort of movies? And then you'll throw that question back. They'll start naming a couple, and yeah, it is like a idea that there's a very limited thing, but it's like if we're speaking about Black and Hispanic and these sorts of things, it is interesting to see how much of it is just this default that we
Yeah,
all kind of default to because it's just everything that's told to us. So yeah.
yeah.
Anyways,
It's
Yeah.
not about people acting white. I don't know how to define acting white, or when people try to define he's acting black, somebody's acting black. It's like, no, that's not what this is about. This is
right.
Barbie's a white
Mhm.
movie. Oppenheimer was also a white movie. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
The Exorcist Believer is a white movie. Well, I don't know what else is out right now, but they're probably white movies.
Yeah, that's
For
true.
sure.
I don't
Field of
know.
Dreams, very white movie. Love it.
I don't know
Great
what
movie.
black movie, like, when there's a black movie out, you typically know, like, this is a black movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Black director, black cast, even the creator, which stars John David Washington, like, that's a white movie though.
Mhm.
That's not disrespect to him. I haven't seen it yet, but it's made by white people's white director. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They try to
Mhm.
have a multicultural cast, but like The Exorcist proved, they're like, if we can get black people out to any movie, why would we make black movies?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's a fun thought experiment to ask someone like what a white movie is. Because it's like if I ask my white friends what a white movie is, it's like a fish trying to describe water. You know what I mean? Where they're like, oh, okay, well, a white movie is, oh, that one movie is a white movie. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're thinking your
He's not too
brain
hard.
is, yeah, it's just it's
It's
everything.
it's this disassociation, right, with whiteness.
Yeah, yeah.
We talk about it a lot, but American individualism is a trip, and it does cause a lot of cognitive dissonance where you just wouldn't be able to see certain things. That's not a criticism. Like I said, I think all of us who are American fall into some level of it because it's everywhere. Like you said, it's like a fish trying to describe water. I think it's wet, but I don't know how to describe wet, right? But like,
Yeah, 100%.
this word I've
Uh,
heard before, wet.
Mhm. It's something else. I've heard about it. I heard about it.
and just like that example, I'm sure when you leave the country for a while, you probably get a
Mhm.
clear picture of it. Like when you're
For
out, you're
sure.
like, I was wet when I was out of the pool, but when I
Right.
was in the pool, I can't really describe it. So when you kind of find a way to escape from American culture or Western culture a little bit, I guess it can maybe potentially become a little more clear to you.
And I think that's
Definitely.
that's what I find most interesting about just this podcast that we have, right? Is like Black Americans are still Americans 100% with all of the good and the bad that comes with, but there is preserved another culture within Black American culture that is not Western European, and it does have different things. It has different incentives, different family definitions, all sorts of different stuff, and
Yeah.
we all just do it every day. And so it is interesting to be able to comment back, right, I think there's this book from a few years ago, A Colony Within a Nation, talking about how America treats its Black communities. But we're, in a lot of ways, the closest that you can get to being foreign within this country.
Right.
Mm.
And so having that perspective and being able to have the conversations, I don't know, I find it fun, but yeah.
Yeah. Being foreign where you're born.
Mm.
Interesting idea, dynamic.
For sure.
I think that's it, man. Let's wrap it up.
For sure.
Let's wrap it up.
For
Thank
sure.
you for everybody. The
Yeah.
Exorcist. Watch it once. Or once every 2 decades, not every decade, not even.
Mm.
Spread it out.
Yeah.
The viewings of The Exorcist.
If you are a person who watches The Exorcist once a year or even more, I kind of want to know about you, but I also don't. Like,
Yeah.
but I would love to hear more
Mm.
about this experience for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a distance. Send an email.
From a strong distance, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Piece for the New Yorker. I'll read that.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't
Yeah, not even like a DM,
directly.
like as
Yeah.
much personal distance as possible.
Hey, superstition. We're human. We'll see you guys next time. Like, share, subscribe if you are willing and so able.
Thank you.
Peace.
Mm-hmm. Peace.
Peace.